Thank you, Sadia. Again, my name is Marlen Glenn. I am the financial wellness educator here with KCT Credit Union, and I'd like to thank Gail Borden Library for supporting us in allowing us to provide some financial wellness education to our community. Joining me today is Jose Guzman, who is our fraud and collections manager, to give us a little bit of an idea of some of our more popular scams and fraud activity these days. And also with me is Sergio Rodriguez, who is our VP of IT and Marketing, to share some insight on some of the safety and technical tips that he can give us. He is our IT guru. So I want to thank both of them for being here with me today on this discussion for identity theft. So let's get started. So no doubt we've all heard of identity theft and fraud. The purpose of today's session is to simply kind of remind everyone of the many ways that you can fall victim to identity theft and fraud. So a lot of experts agree we cannot totally protect ourselves because it's not a matter of if you will become a victim, but when you will become a victim. So there are a few things that you can do to minimize that risk and kind of keep it at bay for as long as possible. So we'll touch on some of those today, as well as what to do when identity theft actually happens to you. So the FDIC estimates that as many as 9 million Americans have had their identity stolen. The population of the United States is about 328 million as of 2019. So that's about 3%, or a very large amount of people are having their identity stolen. The state of Illinois is within the top 10 for the highest reports of identity theft per capita, with 127 for every 100,000 people. And again, these are stats as of 2019. So think about, in the course of a month, how many accounts do you establish or apply for, or how many purchases do you make online? Where you're providing either personal information or financial information or both. So how do you protect that information? Let's talk a little bit about what identity theft is. So identity theft itself is your personal information has been stolen or is being used. Now that they have that actual information, fraudulent transactions can start happening, fraudulent accounts with that information. So they can open up credit cards, they can go and apply for a job or any kind of services, anything for financial gain. So, and know that this is someone's full-time job, and they are ready and waiting to intercept your information in a number of ways at any time of the day or night. So later in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about the various ways that they may use that. But I'm going to have Jose maybe talk a little bit in regards to some of the fraudulent activity that we see or scams that he's had come up lately.
Sure. Thanks, Marlen. Again, as you mentioned, my name is Jose Guzman. I'm the fraud manager at KCT. Some of the more common things is a wide array that we have seen here as far as fraud goes. We have built some very good controls to identify some of it, and some very good preventative measures for our members. But even with that, even with those, even though we have those things in place, there's still instances where we can't control some of our members' habits or activities, because a lot of it really boils down to, you don't know what you don't know. And I think this is a great area, a great space to talk this amongst our community, and that's why we're here. One of the first ones, we touch on, we've seen anything from credit card fraud, because a lot of our payment processes are going electronic for the most part in today's day and age. So we do see some of that. We have seen some instances of synthetic ID, which I'll touch on a little later, and sort of scams for some of our members who are more susceptible, such as our seniors, and also instances of some of our members who, some of our Latino community whose English isn't their first language. So there's also instances where they're also susceptible to being scammed. So those are that's kind of a gist of what we see. And obviously, I know I think one of the bigger things that we've also come across recently is we have had members that have been impacted by the unemployment fraud that's been happening, where they're getting information in the mail that they've applied for benefits, where in fact that's not the case. So those are kind of some of the things that we've seen. But again, I'll touch on those a little bit as we go on.
Very good. So definitely, as you can see on the screen, maybe carrying too much stuff with us. So Jose touched a little bit on the credit card fraud that's happening. Do you carry all of your credit cards with you? Do you need to carry all of your credit cards with you? There's lots of credit card apps out there now, and lots of different ways that we can pay. So the Google Pay, you've got Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, which are actually safer modes of payment. And I know, Sergio, you had touched on a little bit, how do these work?
Yes, I'm a big believer of digital wallets, is what they refer to, digital mobile wallets. Most issuers or banks and FIs do support this type of technology. What it allows people to do is to be able to load your debit or credit card onto your preferred device, whether that's Google or Apple or even Samsung that support these digital wallets. You would then be able to load your card and make purchases at both online retailers as well as merchant retailers that accept tap and pay, or what's called contactless payments. The benefit of this and why it's more secure is when you load your card onto your device has a unique security token. It's unique to that device. So when you go and use an online retailer or you make a purchase at a merchant, what happens is when you put your phone up into that terminal, what happens is that token is sent over to Visa or MasterCard. Visa or MasterCard, then what they do is they look at that token to see who is the financial institution that actually has that account. They then forward it over to the institution, so that would come over to us. We would then take that token and then push it to the actual account number. We will look at the account to make sure the funds are available. We would then approve that transaction. We send it back to Visa. Visa never sends back the card number to the merchant. It's always being done via this token. The benefit of this is if you ever have any fraud, you don't have to worry about it because, again, it's on a secure token on your device. Fraudsters aren't going to get your information. They're not going to get your account number. They're not going to get your expiration date. It's a token that's being passed. So it's a much more secure transaction, and it's a much quicker transaction. I know a lot of people, when EMV, the chip card, came out, it takes kind of a long time because you have to put it in there and wait. But with the tap and pay or contactless, you put your phone up, it dings, and that's it. It even gives you alerts or push notifications letting you know the merchant, the time, and the dollar amount of that transaction that you made. So it's much more secure type of transaction, and I highly recommend people to use that. It's very convenient, and to your point, Marlen, you can actually load numerous cards on it. So you don't have to worry about carrying a wallet. You can put, 4 or 5. You can put a couple of debit cards, a couple of credit cards, and when you go to the merchant, you have the ability to go ahead and pick what card you want to use. Same thing with online purchases. This is much more secure because think about this. If you're one that does a lot of online purchases and you're putting your credit card information on bestbuy.com, on amazon.com, on target.com, those are all points of failures that can be compromised. So what I like to recommend people to do is if you're using purchases through your mobile phone, some of these websites do allow you to use Apple Pay to make that payment. Same thing as Google Pay. Also, there's services like PayPal or Visa Secure. What you do is you enroll in these services, you enter in your billing information, your shipping information, and your card information once. Then when you're on these different retailers that support these services, you log in with your credentials, it then passes over your payment stuff. So that way those retailers are never gonna hold your card information. So that's just a better way to make sure that you don't have your card stuff all over the internet in ways where people can get compromised, so.
And there's one thing that we're all carrying, right? It's our phones with us all the time.
I sometimes forget my wallet, but I don't forget my phone.
Yeah, none of us forget our phones, right? And if we do, we're like, where's my phone? So Yeah, so definitely carrying too much stuff, you know, on our person can be a bad thing. You know, do you carry your pay stubs? Likely not many of us are really getting an actual physical pay stub anymore. Most of us have the direct deposit, which is a great option there. Most of us have, you know, an HR website or some sort of a program that we log into for our pay stubs, or, you know, even our W-2s or anything like that. So definitely, especially ladies, if we're carrying purses and we tend to just kind of throw our stuff in our purse, you know, having a pay stub, having, you know, our passwords written down, or, you know, deposit slips, things like that can be very dangerous. You know, for our passwords, there's plenty of apps out there that can keep our passwords safe and secure. You know, just to mention a couple, Log Me Once or PassHub, or I think it's MyKey. Those are all great websites to kind of look into as well. And a lot of them are free. They'll kind of secure all your passwords in one place. So if you're anything like me and incredibly forgetful, you might want to look into one of those password apps as well.
And actually, really quick, Marlen, when you're talking about passwords, one thing I really like to recommend people, because this is very common practice, is do not use the same password across sites. The problem with that is once that credential gets compromised, now they can get access to all the different sites where you share that username and password. One thing that I like to do, other than using like password managers, is I create almost the same password, but I always have a prefix specific to the site I'm logging in. So that way it's a little bit easier for me to remember, but all my passwords are different for all the sites that I log in. It is not good to share username and passwords.
And it can get a little bit overwhelming, because depending on how many places you need passwords for, you know, you got to kind of try to remember all of those. So one of those password apps can be hugely useful, because you don't want to be carrying around a piece of paper with all of your passwords written down on it. So, but yes, thank you. So why is this such a problem? Well, unfortunately, our laws just haven't caught up to these types of crimes yet. You know, as far as jail time or fines, or the seriousness and the scope of these types of crimes. You know, so this is the fastest growing crime in America. And unfortunately, it will ruin your credit, it'll ruin your budget, it'll ruin your reputation. But unfortunately, it really kind of comes down to convenience. You know, we do a lot online. Again, we all have our phones, and we're all kind of able to buy something online. It's all at our fingertips, right? So it's just become a huge problem. And again, it's somebody's full-time job to try to intercept your information. So as we can see on the pie graph here, there's various types of ways, different ways that someone can commit fraud with your identity. Credit card fraud, obviously taking first place here. We heard Jose kind of talk a little bit about it. It's definitely the major type of fraud that is happening now. But again, using methods like the Apple Pay or the Google Pay, like Sergio talked about, is definitely a more secure way to pay. Unemployment fraud is rapidly growing in the United States, where they're validating personal information to build kind of synthetic identities. And Jose touched on it, and I think he can maybe share some more insight on that, the synthetic identities with the unemployment.
Yes, yeah. The whole well, specific to Illinois, with the whole impact of the pandemic, and there's various states across the U.S., Massachusetts, California, and there was a lot of them with this whole pandemic created, was obviously you know, our unemployment rates went up, but then because a lot of the state unemployment agencies are moved to all the electronic applications for benefits, and as such, there was a lot of vulnerabilities within those systems, and fraudsters were very good to exploit them. In Illinois, there were some instances where I think some people did receive the I believe they get a debit card with the benefits in there, but most of the time again, this is specific to Illinois, it was the people were getting the information of the unemployment application and benefits being approved or things of that nature to their actual home, right? So and looking into that and speaking to some of the peers in the fraud area, that's just it was basically, again, and this is only again for the Illinois part of it, it's a build out or an investment excuse me, as far as synthetic ID, which is basically they're just building out profiles. And when they gathered this information and they submitted these unemployment claims, once they got approved and they saw that they were generated out, that validated to them that they have a good name, a good social security number, and probably a good date of birth. So the whole what synthetic ID is basically a build out of identities of people who really don't exist. So once they have a name, a social security number, and a date of birth, they'll use maybe the date of birth and social, but they'll create another name for it. And what they'll do is they'll apply for credit somewhere. They're going to get the decline because there's no credit established with it, but that creates a profile out there already, which they can build out. They will typically you go and deposit $500 and get a secured visa to kind of build that credit. So the whole synthetic ID is a big investment with in the fraud world with these fraudsters, because you really have to build it out. And it's something that is long-term, but once they have, and obviously they do this with tons and tons of identities and whatnot. Once they build it out and they start getting cars, applying for large unsecured loans, credit cards, and they strike it pretty big. So for them, it's a pretty good investment, and they get really good return on it. But what I always tell members is, I think Sergio alluded to earlier, Equifax had a few years back had a huge breach where over 300 plus million identities were compromised. So, there's this thing called the dark web where a lot of these fraudsters go to get identities, credit cards, things like that, and to use. So I just like to advise our members and just people in general to proceed as if your information is already out there, right? And that's probably the best advice that I can give everyone is to protect yourself and set up alerts with the credit bureaus. Set up text alerts with your accounts. I think Sergio touched a little bit on our wallets, but you can also do that with our credit or debit cards, where as soon as it's swiped, you can set up a text alert where you'll get alerted immediately. So it's very much we definitely have to take a proactive stance on this, because you think that it's not going to happen to you, but I'm pretty certain that we all at this point know someone who's been impacted.
Yeah, it's rampant, right? And yeah, I think I'm glad that you brought that up. Our credit card app, I have it to alert me if my KCT, obviously, credit card or debit card is used and it's a transaction of more than $50, I get a text message. So it's, those types of apps that are absolutely great, because while, I may go out shopping today after the seminar and, do lots of transactions, I will get a text for each and every one of those that's over that $50 threshold. So those are great for keeping up on what's happening with my credit card or my debit card.
Oh, you know what? Actually, and one more thing. One of the more common things that are members that are susceptible. One of the people that are members in our instance that are more susceptible, but this applies to anyone that is banks with the large banks and other credit unions. Just because you maintain a zero balance on your card, whether you have to use it for some time, and you paid it down to a zero balance, you still have to keep an eye on it, right? Because even though some of these transactions post and they were not authorized, they're fraudulent, whatever the case is, there are some time restrictions as far as how quick you have to dispute those, right? Once you get past that 60-day threshold, and that it could be a few days after one, but generally 60 days, which you'll be getting 2 statements. After that, even if you didn't authorize it and those charges are there, your financial institution, and that includes us, we have no way to recover, to go back to Visa to get those funds and recover for you. So please look at your statement every month, even when you have a zero balance, because that's one of the more common instances where we see some of the members who've been impacted by some of this.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add is, one thing that people can do that I think they tend to forget about that they can do to protect themselves is, a lot of people use devices to browse the internet. We all do it at home. We're kind of unwinding, but most people forget that you need to have antivirus software on that device. Most times when you buy a new device, it usually comes with trial software, but you need to have a paid subscription in order to get the latest updates that protects you with all the different vulnerabilities that come out, because every single day there's new vulnerabilities that are coming out. So it's very important that people have a reputable antivirus software, but also have a paid subscription so that way you're getting the latest updates to keep yourself protected. Now, there are some like Microsoft Security Essentials for Microsoft operating systems that is free. But there's also like McAfee's a big one. Norton Antivirus is a good one as well. And some of those programs like Norton Antivirus will also come with a password keeper to help people maintain their passwords in an easy format. Also, as Jose was talking about, it is important because, some of us do have numerous credit cards, but we only really use one. One thing that you can do that we also have what's called card controls through our digital card app is you can actually suspend or block that card if you have no intention of using it. That way, then if someone were to be able to get it, they wouldn't be able to actually use that card. Once you actually want to use it, you can go back into the app to unsuspend it. Or for example, in our app, you also have the ability to block certain types of transactions. So for example, if you're never going to do an international transaction, you can block all those types of transactions to be able to limit your risk or exposure. Same thing like ATM withdrawals. If you never do those, you can also block that type of category. Or even online purchases, you'd be able to block those as well. So those are different things that a consumer can do to be able to protect themselves and limit their risk.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on with our program here. So 36% of fraud is using your already established credit cards or debit cards. So we talked a little bit about that, right? But this means that somebody is physically using your credit card or your credit card number, right? So a lot of times, this is probably going to be somebody that you actually know. I think we see it quite a bit. I know Jose can probably talk on this for days, but it's usually going to be somebody that you know, unfortunately, because they're either physically have your credit or debit card or somehow had access to getting your number, and either know your PIN number or know that CVV number on the back. So it's unfortunate, but I think it's usually someone that you know or somebody that you trusted at some point. They might agree with that.
Yes. Yeah. So that is one of the more challenging aspects of it. Is that we have we have instances of members that are reporting fraud to call Visa, and then with the way anytime our members file a dispute, Visa gathers all the information as far as the transaction or transactions if there's more than one. Then they send that over to me. So from there, I get Visa provides very detailed information as to whether your card was physically there or not, whether it was an online transaction, but the credentials were already verified via sending a text to the device on file and things like that. So, so for that reason, a lot of instances, it is some of family members. One of the more common things is sometimes we'll have a grandparent who lets their little grandchild buy a app on their device, and then they don't realize that, well, this is a recurring charge every month, or the grandson just keeps playing the game and buying more coins or whatever it is, and it just racks up the bill. And so that's for that reason. In the fraud world, there's a lot of terms for it, but we refer to it as friendly fraud because it's usually someone that those transactions that you did authorize, but you maybe didn't want it to authorize it to that extent, but a lot of times, again, it's sometimes the parents or even just general parents with a lot of the gamers, right, with the PlayStation or Xbox accounts, and then their parents link up their debit or credit card. Well, then you have their son or daughter just racking up playing till 2 in the morning, and they keep racking up the charges. And then they say, well, they didn't authorize that. So it's kind of more like a buyer's remorse sort of thing. And one of the things that I like to tell in these instances when I talk to members that report this is to just buy a gift card, load it for an X amount of dollars, load it up. And once it's done, it's done. And then you go, if it's I'm not familiar with, I think you can preload them or get a new one. And then you're able to kind of control that, because once those kids get into those games, they just keep buying them more lives or coins or to get to bigger levels. And obviously a lot of these kids, particularly in the pandemic, we're spending a lot of time doing that. So, that's kind of the things that we see here with regards to, some of the friendly fraud that we see here at the credit union.
That's an excellent tip. I definitely would agree with the whole gift card thing. Is my son wants this and that on PlayStation, and I'm like, ask for your birthday, ask for gift cards, because I'm not giving you my credit card or my debit card. So
Yeah.
excellent tip. Thank you.
Also, really quick, there was a question that came in about, what do you suggest to use for those who have in-home assisted living and the working shops for you? Jose just alluded to that. Preloadable debit cards where you can pre-fund a certain dollar amount to that way limit your exposure. So that way, if you want to only put 20 bucks a week or 20 bucks a month, that way they can have that card to make that purchase, but they won't have access to your checking account to be able to pull all that money out. You go ahead and preload it the set amount that you want to be able to use. Absolutely.
All right, so a couple of statistics on your screen there. Some reasons that this can be so easy is generic passwords. And I think Sergio kind of talked about that a little bit more, or having the same password across for various accounts, not a good idea. But generic passwords, if you're using password or password 01 or password 00, that's not a very difficult password. So you really need to make sure that for each and every site that you're going into, that you're establishing an account, that you're putting personal information into, that you're putting financial information into, that is an actual secure password. And we will talk a little bit more about that. But we also just kind of touched a little bit on secure websites. Make sure that every website that you are putting personal or financial information into has that HTTPS. That S at the end means secure, right? So any website that you are logging into, anything that you're clicking into from an email is not a great idea first and foremost, but you should be verifying that that actual website has that HTTPS at the end. If it does not have an S at the end, it's not a secure website. So you should not be entering any personal or financial information there. And then let's see, what do we have there? 18% are victimized by a friend or neighbor, and we just kind of talked about that. So just be, overly cautious when it comes to, your credit cards, your financial statements. Really, those are just for your eyes. So identity theft happens in two ways, non-technological schemes like the social engineering. This is probably one of the more popular ways of doing it. People kind of either calling you and trying to get information from you, deceiving you into thinking they're, somebody from the IRS or somebody from the unemployment office or somebody from your financial institution. I can tell you for certain that, nobody's ever going to call you from your financial institution to verify what your account number is, unless you have actually initiated that conversation, whether you reached out to, for example, Jose and said, hey, I think I have fraudulent activity on my credit card or my debit card. Then obviously Jose is likely going to call you back and want you to verify your information. But if you never initiated that contact, your financial institution, the FBI, is never going to call you to verify any of your information out of the blue. But social engineering is a way that they can do that either over the phone or via computer, via email, knocking on your door. just trying to scam you out of some of your personal information. And then technological schemes are obviously a little bit more common because again, the convenience of us doing everything online, really kind of makes us a little bit more vulnerable. So again, they don't actually even need your physical credit card anymore. They can just have your saved credit card number and have that verification code on the back, your CVV code. And I think Sergio kind of talked a little bit about how that CVV code works, but know that you should assume, again, like Jose said, that your information is out there and somebody's trying to get it. Because again, as I started this seminar, it's not a matter of, if you'll become a victim, it's almost more when, and what you can do to kind of deter that from happening. So what are some of the warning signs that you might be a victim? Any of these can mean that your information is out there and has been compromised. So know some of these warning signs. If you're missing, mail, a really good way to know if you're missing mail. Did you know that you can set up with the United States Post Office, you can actually get images of all your mail on a daily basis to your email. So you can see exactly what should be delivered to your mailbox. That's a great way to keep tabs on your mail. Statements, Jose alluded to this. Make sure that you're reviewing those monthly statements, whether it's your credit card statements, your bank statements, anything financial. You should be looking at all of your statements on a monthly basis to see if there's any transactions that you did not make, any transactions that are more than the amounts that you have spent. So make sure that you're opening your mail, make sure that that junk mail that you receive, you're not just tossing that in the garbage. That should be shredded. You should have a cross shredder to get rid of that information, because this is the type of information that they're looking for, that these fraudsters, these thieves are actually looking for. Jose talked to us a little bit about the synthetic identities. They're really just putting together Marlen Glenn's name and Jose Guzman's address and Sergio Rodriguez's social security number and making this fake person. So the more information they can get from you, the better.
I would just like to add, Marlen, yes, it's absolutely important to check your statements, but there's other ways to do it. For example, I do not look at my statements, but as I mentioned to you, I have alerts for all my cards for any time a purchase is made for more than $1. So that way, if any purchase is made, I will get a text message immediately. And if it's something that I didn't do, then that makes me act and do something about it, whether I need to reach out to the issuer to report my card lost and stolen. Because to me, it's a little bit too much to check my statements. Now, don't get me wrong, it is important to do, but that's a way around it. That's another way to do it so that you don't have to look at your statements every single time. Just set up for these account alerts, because once you do it once, you're done. Also, really quick, there was a question that came in about your HTTPS, about the secure websites. What you can do is in most internet browsers, you will see a little padlock next to the address bar that tells you that that website is indeed secure. And if you click on the padlock, it'll give you more information about that security certificate and who owns it. Also, the other thing is there was a question about antivirus on phones and card controls. So I alluded about antivirus, like McAfee, for example, Norton. A lot of these services or software now has numerous licenses. So when you buy one, you can put it on up to 5 different devices. So you can put it on your iPad, on your mobile device, on your desktop computer, on your laptop. And one thing I would highly recommend, and this is something I do, is, if you're a new customer for those programs, you get really deep discounts. But what they'll do is they'll enroll you in an annual subscription. So it'll automatically bill you after a year. I always turn that off, because then what I do when my license is up, I then go back with the different email address as if I'm a new customer again. So I get the really deep discount again. And that's what I do. That's just a way, because it can be costly, but there's ways to get cheaper codes. Or you can look at Retail Me Not, for example, or other shopping websites that'll give you coupon codes that you can do to make some of these purchases.
Absolutely. Or shop it around, right? Compare it to other services and see what kind of discounts they're offering for new members. So great tips. And that was a perfect segue, because, when it comes to how to protect yourself, alerts, right? alerts on your credit card, alerts on your debit card, alerts on your credit report. You can set transaction alerts, overage alerts, inquiry alerts. So just knowing what is happening with your financial documentation, with your financial credit cards, with everything financial, maybe a little bit of a hassle. You may be bombarded with emails or text, from your activity, depending on what it is that you're doing. But the hassle is definitely worth it. It's definitely worth knowing what is happening with your financials. Your credit report is one of the most important financial documents that you own. Know what is happening with it at all times. I'm not suggesting that you have to go in and look at your credit report, on a weekly basis or anything. But if you set those alerts, you will be alerted to what is happening. The optoutprescreen.com that you see on your screen there is a great website. If you get a lot of junk mail, what I like to call junk mail, it's a great website to go in and kind of opt out a lot from various websites. Again, if you don't already have a shredder, I would certainly invest in a cross shredder to get rid of all of that junk mail that you may be receiving if you decide not to opt out. But be consistent in reviewing your personal information on a constant basis. How are we doing on time? We're going to actually kind of forego this video here. It really kind of just touches on everything that we've already touched on here with our experts, Jose and Sergio. So the next couple of slides just talk a little bit about how to protect yourself. And again, using strong and maybe nonsensical passwords. What do I mean by nonsensical passwords? Well, maybe your mother's maiden name is vehicle or farmer or truck. I guess farmer could be a last name, right? But something that doesn't necessarily make sense. So what was your cat's first name? First name was House. So something that's not necessarily going to actually make sense or is appropriate for the type of question that they're asking.
And yeah, one thing, Marlen, really quick, I'd like to mention is, it's great to have a strong password. Make sure not to share passwords across different sites, but it's also very important for those that support it, do what's called MFA, Multi-Factor Authentication. All financial institution websites do this. A lot of shopping and retail sites do this as well. What this means is not only will you need your username and password to log in, but it will trigger what's called usually a one-time passcode. And I'm sure most people have seen this already today, whereas it will send you a text message with the code that you then have to enter. So that way it's multi-factor, meaning not only did you do your password, but you're also using this passcode that just went to you to then be able to authenticate yourself. I would highly recommend, specifically financial institution sites, any banking or shopping sites, make sure you enable multi-factor authentication. It's just another way to protect yourself and that account.
That dual security, agreed. Because again, it's not very hard to find out somebody's mother's maiden name anymore, right? We're all on social media all the time. Facebook has all these cutesy little quizzes that, I don't know about you guys, but my friends send me all the time. I don't know why, because I never answer them, but there's all these cute little quizzes of, oh, what was the first make and model of your car? And, what's your favorite song? Where did you go on your honeymoon? So it's not difficult to find out information about someone if you really wanted to. And again, this is somebody's full-time job. So they are browsing social media to try to get somebody's mother's maiden name, to try to get the city that you were born in. These are very common security questions that could actually make you a lot more vulnerable by, kind of answering these cute little quizzes out there. So again, either having a nonsensical password or, having, other systems in place that Sergio was talking about is huge for protecting yourself. We're all vulnerable. However, some of us may be a little bit more than others. Elder abuse is quite prevalent, whether it's a family member or caregiver mismanaging or withdrawing funds from an elderly person's account. You've got romance scams, which are very common amongst the elderly. You know, many times the elderly are more looking for companionship. You know, but there's also obviously emails, phone calls, and social media where assailant try to, you know, establish some sort of a relationship and request personal information. The elderly can definitely be vulnerable targets, specifically, and mainly because, again, they're trying to establish some sort of relationship, and usually they have already established wealth too, right? So you know, they may have trust funds, they may have pensions, they may be getting Social Security. So and they may not always have somebody that's you know, a family member that they can trust to actually take care of these things. But Jose, do you find that elderly are a big target?
Yes, yes, yeah, definitely. Our elderly, we've seen recently. I've had some instances of our elderly members who've been impacted, um, and just in general, our elderly right now. That is a big focus of the in the fraud world of scam of our elderly being scammed. Um, and it just the whole dynamic that's involved with that, right? We have a lot of baby boomers who are in that age level who have retired, had a good amount of savings, so they're very susceptible. And again, into the whole family dynamic, right? We have our elderly parents, and we have our own families that we tend to, and we figure that they're okay. But we just have to be a little more proactive, and hopefully having the comfort level to have that talk, the financial talk with your parents, to either hopefully you can get added on as either as an authorized user on a credit card, or joint on their accounts to some extent, so that you can actually see those things yourself. Because what often happens is that we leave our seniors out to themselves, and we're within the last 10-15 years, the whole financial world has completely evolved, where they can get impacted. The latest numbers I was able to pull was from 2019, and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, reported as of 2019, romance scams among seniors were $84 million, and that's just in 2019. So that's an astronomical figure, but those are the actual instances where some of these uh, losses were actually reported, right? Oftentimes, some of their seniors are embarrassed and they don't report them. So it's pretty easy to see that that's probably the actual figure is probably much higher than 84 million. And most recently, about a couple months ago, we had a member here that wired out almost in the span of various transactions. I think it was a total of $150,000 within a span of different, I want to say like 4 or 5 months. And the only reason we found out is because the member never notified us, or I was never advised of it, but just as a whole, we were never notified. I received a call from a detective because she went straight to the authorities. And so I kind of reached out to the member, and she was, as I mentioned, embarrassed, and she didn't really want to talk about it too much. So I just kind of made her aware that we're here, and if there's anything that happens, please don't, reach out. We're here. So then last month, I put some notes on the account that I wanted to be alerted on any wire transfers, and she wanted to wire some money again. And she told me the story about some gentleman that's overseas that she's been in contact with via Skype, and that was her boyfriend. He was much younger than her. It was a lot of red flags, and I did not sign off on the wire. I did not let her wire the funds, and she said that she was just going to go to transfer the money to Chase and send the funds out that way. I don't know whether she did or not, but I did have to reach out to the detective again to see if there was any way we can contact the son. And so that was kind of been in the works. And then just earlier this week, she actually gave me the heads up that she was gonna, this is a member who has a lot of money. And she's a widow, and she's in her 77 years old. And she told me she was gonna wire $100,000, that 30,000 of it was to cover her living expenses. So she's kind of prepping me to allow her to send the money out again. And you know, I have all the notes on the account, so I was pretty sure it was the same person. And then when she realized that I knew who it was, she was going to wire him 78,000. And I told her we wasn't going to sign off on that, but I built a good rapport with her. I actually got her to send me all the documentation that these fraudster was sending her, and she did. She was a little nervous about it. And when I looked at it, it was astonishing. I snipped and I kind of put everything together for her so that she could see it, because she thought she was getting surveys, documents from the Supreme Court of Switzerland. I mean, everything looked legit. So she was getting bank statements. She was getting this particular person's passport, driver's license, and the passport and driver's license had the same picture, but were issued 7 years apart. The figures in the bank statements did not add up. So when I pointed that out to her, she then realized then that, yeah, she's getting scammed, even though she was adamant that she was not. So the reason I give that example is because these fraudsters really build a rapport with our members, who a lot of times don't have that person to conversate with anymore. She's a widow. This member is a widow. She has a couple of children, but they have their own families. We have social media, right? I think we think it's cool, and our elderly get on Facebook. So they're very susceptible to get approached by someone that gives them that attention that maybe they lack, and pulls on those strings, and all of a sudden they create this sense of urgency that they suddenly need money, and our members are more than willing to send it out.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, we definitely need to keep a close eye on our parents, our grandparents, because they can be very susceptible. Another group that can be very susceptible is kids, right? Kids can be the perfect target for identity theft. They have clean credit histories. Their socials have not likely been used in any kind of transactions. So thieves can use their social security numbers to start a clean credit, right? So as parents, we typically don't think of checking our kids' credit reports, right? We may have checked our own. Hopefully we've checked our own, on a regular basis, but we don't usually think of checking our children's credit report. You can go directly into any of the 3 major credit bureaus to check your children's credit report, to see if there's an actual credit report out there. Typically, you need a copy of a birth certificate, a social security card, and a copy of proof of address. Usually, to obtain this information, you'll need to actually physically mail the request in. That I know of, Experian is the only bureau where you can set up a child ID scan on their actual website and check out whether there is an actual credit report, based on that social security number. So Equifax and TransUnion, I do believe, are still requiring that request in writing. So I would suggest that if you do so, that goes out certified mail, because you're sending a lot of personal information. So certified mail with a signature required request attached to it would be your safest route when you are checking for your children's credit reports. Victims can spend a lot of time and money cleaning up their name and credit, and this typically comes with some humiliation, stress, anger, frustration, and unfortunately, very little support. So you should be checking your own credit report at least every few months. You do get a free copy of your credit report from all 3 of the major credit bureaus, so Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. You are required to get 1 free copy every year from each of these. So what I usually suggest is every 4 months, or maybe you do it around the holidays, do it spring break, and then after your summer break. So whatever works out best for you, but what I would suggest is pull one every 4 months. So for example, today you pull Experian, and then 4 months from now you pull TransUnions, and then 4 months from then you pull Equifax. This way, you're kind of keeping tabs on your credit report throughout the year, instead of pulling all 3 of them just once a year. While not all 3 of them have exactly the same information on them, really it's a way to just, again, kind of keep tabs and make sure that there's no suspicious activity out there. Because when you are looking at your credit report, you want to make sure that you are really looking at all of the information that's out there, your personal information, all of those trade lines. Make sure that those are all your actual trade lines. Look at what inquiries have been out there. Your personal information is very important. If if there's a previous address that you never lived at, there's potentially crossing information with another individual that might have the same name. So it's important to make sure that all of the information on your credit report is accurate, and anything that is not, you need to dispute and or correct. Typically, if you're pulling your credit reports or your credit bureaus directly through those sites, there's going to be links where you can click on to correct that information or dispute any information as well.
All right, Marlen, we got a couple of questions here quick I want to address because it has to do with a lot of this stuff. Do we recommend credit freezes? Absolutely. Marlen and I, we do have credit freezes. I started doing it once that big data breach was happening with Experian. How that works is you go to each credit bureau. So you go to Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. You go ahead and create an account. You have to verify your identity. It'll ask you information that's on your public trade line to make sure it is you. Once you do that, you can create a username and password, and then you can establish a credit freeze. What that does is that no financial institution or even store card can pull your credit report. So the downside of this is if you are legitimately trying to open up a loan or getting a mortgage or open up a store card, you need to make sure to go back into those websites to temporarily lift that credit freeze. This is something I think is very important. And I know there's other question about enrolling in free credit monitoring. That really is up to you. That is legislation that when a company is breached, they have to offer that to those that have been potentially breached. However, I don't normally do it. I just do the credit freeze, because with the credit freeze in place, no one can open up an account in your name without you lifting it. So that's something I recommend. It's something I do with all 3 credit bureaus, and it's something that's free and that's available to anybody who can do it today. So.
Thank you. So yes, definitely setting alerts, having those credit report freezes, and you do have to freeze your credit report through all 3 of those major bureaus. So you don't go into TransUnion, freeze it, and assume that the other 2 bureaus are following suit. You do need to go into each one of those and set a credit freeze or set any kind of alerts that you're setting on your credit report. So be aware that is definitely something that you need to do at all 3 of those. And filing a police report. So if you do have any kind of identity theft, any kind of fraud that is happening with your credit report, with your social, with your information, filing a police report is definitely the way to go. Identitytheft.gov is a great website to go into. It's linked also to the FTC, where they have an identity theft affidavit where you can contact each creditor on your credit report to let them know what the situation is and what is happening with your credit report if you do become a victim. So with that, I want to see if there is any additional questions.
There's a few questions here. I'll address some of these. So one of the things about being a newborn baby, and you alluded to that, so you can go ahead and reach out to the credit bureaus to check their credit report. Also is when the question was asked that if you get added to an account, does that make you liable? That was what Jose was talking about, where if you have a parent, an older parent, you can be put on that account. If we're talking about a bank account like savings and checking account, no, it doesn't make you liable in any sense. because you're just on that account to be able to do it. Now, if you're a co-borrower on an account, well then yes, then you are technically liable and you're being reported to the credit bureau. However, you can also be added as an authorized user, but this is something that you really need to talk to your parent to find out what they feel most comfortable. But there's other things that you can do to protect those accounts. For example, you can add a password to your account. So here at KCT, when a person enrolls in a new membership, we do highly recommend for them to set a password. So anytime they call us or they actually come into the teller workstation or teller line, they're asked for that password every single time. That's just another step to make sure that we're dealing with the right person. Another thing that you can do is make sure that you have the most up-to-date information with your financial institutions. Make sure they know your up-to-date mobile number, your home phone number, your address, your email address, because if there's anything that's potentially compromised on your account, they're going to reach out to you. So you need to make sure that they have the most up-to-date information. Nowadays, you can do most of the stuff online without having to actually call in or go in. So it's a much more convenient way to do that. The other thing is, how do you go ahead and upload Apple or Google Pay? So on that respective device, you can just do a search for it, and Apple Pay is super easy. Actually, when you have a new phone, they actually walk you through it. What you normally do is you go ahead and go to Apple Pay, or what they call is their Apple Wallet. You then add a card. You usually just take a picture of the card number and then enter that information. You put in your address. And then sometimes you might have to call them just to confirm that you are really you and that you have access to this account. So they may ask you questions like, okay, you've done a few transactions the past month. What were the dollar amounts, or where were the merchants that you made those purchases? Again, it's just an extra security step to make sure that you really are you. Same thing with Google Play, it's very similar to that. But also I would highly recommend, if you want, you guys can just do a quick Google search on Apple, how to load Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there's great videos on how to actually do that. It's very, very simple. And once you do it, it's done. So yeah, it's very, very easy to do, and I highly recommend it. And it's now actually much more convenient, especially now during the COVID pandemic. You know, most merchants do take contactless. Even gas stations now, for example, Woodman's gas stations now, they have contactless at the pump, so you can use your phone to make that purchase. However, with debit cards, you're still going to have to put in your PIN, but with credit cards, you don't have to do that at all when you run it as a credit transaction. And then for the credit freezes, so when you go to each respective websites, just do a search for credit freeze. They will then walk you through what you have to do that. It is actually a very easy process, but again, you do have to do it on each credit bureau. So Experian.com, TransUnion.com, Equifax.com. You would have to do it for each one of these three agencies. And I think the credit freezes have expirations, or do they last until lifted? So when you put in a credit freeze, it's indefinitely. It's going to be on there forever until you go on there. Now, what you can do is you can lift it completely. What I do, like if I am actually going to open up a loan or a credit card, I will go into all the credit union sites and then, or sorry, the credit bureau sites, and I will lift it temporarily. I will say for a week. You can define a start date and an end date. So that way, once you're done doing that loan, it's automatically going to put that freeze in place. And yes, I personally would recommend to leave it out there forever. Like I said, though, the only downside is if you are trying to get an auto loan or a mortgage, you just have to make sure to go in there. And even if you forget, like I have forgotten a few times, the lender will tell you, hey, we can't pull your credit. There's a freeze. Oh, okay, let me go in really quick to unblock it. And it's immediate. Then you can call them back and then they can pull your credit report.
Yeah, even if you're going to Costco and trying to get a card.
Right, you forget sometimes, absolutely.
Forget. Like, why? Oh, we can't look at your credit report. Okay. And then I think secure website icon, HTTPS.
Yeah, you'll see the padlock in the address bar if it's a secure site. That's just a visual representation to know that you're on a secure site. And even there's some like antivirus. I know Norton's a big one. What they will even do is if you put in a plugin for your browser, they'll make the address bar show green, telling you that it's safe, to letting you know that it's a secure site. But you can always look for that padlock. That's definitely one way to do it.
See, should we enroll for free credit report monitoring services after receiving a notice that our personal information?
Yeah, I already addressed all these questions, Marlen.
Right.
And like I said, you can. I'm not a big fan of it. The credit freeze pretty much takes care of that. Now, one thing, KCT Credit Union cardholders, we're going to be rolling out a free service to our credit card holders next month. What it is we've partnered with Visa and Norton LifeLock to give our members a free credit monitoring service. So for those that want it, they'll be able to do it. Now, if you want to upgrade that, members will be able to get a discount for the first year. And the upgraded account, all that does is gives you monetary protections that if you are a victim of identity theft, they will help you recover some of those funds. But the free version just does a simple credit monitoring. So, but again, a lot of antivirus softwares do that as well today. So.
All right, very good. So we are at 1 minute past, but with that, I would like to thank my colleagues, Jose and Sergio, for joining me today and sharing their knowledge and expertise, as well as, again, the Gailbourn Library for teaming up with us here at KCT to provide some financial wellness education. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.